In the ongoing question of Trump running for office, some people believe that he might have already been disqualified and are trying to prevent him from being on the ballot on that basis. One lawsuit filed in New Hampshire to try to prevent Trump from being on the ballot on the basis that by being part of an insurrection against the United States, he's already disqualified on the 14th Amendment basis. So this is a lawsuit that's been filed in New Hampshire and I imagine other jurisdictions as well. So let's learn a little bit more about this Trump-related drama. This current issue is being brought to the fore by a man named Castro, no known relation to the Cuban dictator, who is an attorney and entrepreneur who ran for U.S. House and Senate in 2020 and 2022, didn't qualify for the first presidential debate, and told the Globe he doesn't intend to appear on the ballot for the presidential contest in all 50 states. He apparently is just targeting swing states and plans to file self-funded lawsuits in several more states by the end of the week and is representing himself. His primary goal apparently is to deny Trump a second term. So he apparently is running for president, not to actually become president, but to try to give himself standing to say that Trump, who's on the ballot, shouldn't be on the ballot. So this 39-year-old attorney would like to use his attorney-like powers in all these lawsuits, and so he's running a one-man quixotic campaign. So, okay, let's do that. Castro has also filed a federal lawsuit in Florida in January, seeking to have Trump disqualified. A judge dismissed that lawsuit in June for lack of legal standing and rightness. Castro appealed to the 11th Circuit and asked the U.S. Supreme Court to rule that he is standing to sue. So, yeah, I mean, his standing issues are not great. Also, that it's not exactly ripe yet because, of course, the ballot hasn't existed yet. So the issue of ripeness and standing not going particularly well for him, as you would expect. Castro, for his part, claims that he and Trump are competing for the same political position, which only in the most technically correct is the best kind of correct sense, I suppose, and therefore competing for votes and fundraising dollars. There's a basis for the argument that he himself suffers from harm if Trump is allowed to keep competing for the GOP's 2024 nomination. The gist of Castro's argument is that one of some legal scholars have suggested is plausible. Northwestern University law professor Stephen Calabrese recently argued that another Republican presidential candidate, former Chris Christie of New Jersey, is legally injured by the Trump candidacy and should sue to boot Trump's name from the ballot. So, yeah, we're trying this tactic. Calabrese told the Globe that he figures any candidate who qualifies for the ballot has standing to sue, which, is debatable at best, but that's what we're going with. Ultimately, that question of standing will need to be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, he said. I hope this guy will pursue it to the federal level, he said. So, at least he has one law professor who thinks that there's some merit to the crusade. So, yeah. Calabrese, who describes himself as a conservative Republican, worked in the President Ronald Reagan's White House and said he voted for Republican presidential candidates every 4 years since, with the exception of 2020. Calabrese says he voted for Trump in 2016, then abstained in 2020 because Trump has suggested postponing the election. In an ideal world, Calabrese said, I think that Trump's second impeachment should have proceeded, and he should have been disqualified from holding office again in the future at that time. Which, maybe it should have. I mean, the House tried to bring the impeachment charges. The Senate had a hearing on it, and the Senate decided not to convict. So in your ideal world, he would have been convicted and disqualified by the U.S. Senate. But that didn't happen. So now you're trying a different way. At this point, Calabrese says he sees valid constitutional arguments both to deem Trump ineligible for the ballot and to spare Trump from prosecution for his alleged crimes. My desire is that he not be on the ballot and that he not be punished. I don't want to see the country go down that road. So he wants to say simultaneously, Trump has not been on the ballot, cannot be on the ballot under the 13th Amendment, or 14th Amendment, Section 3. So he can't be on the ballot, but also is criminally immune. So he won't be immune and won't be able to appear if he has his way. Well, there are a lot of prosecutors out there who would like to disagree with him on that issue. Others have said that legal theory contradicts relevant precedent and represents nothing more than a political attack, which I would tend to agree. Yeah, there is problems all over the place, not the least of which is his own self-contradictory ideas. While some see the 14th Amendment as a tool to defend democratic norms, the former president's supporters see this untested legal theory as anti-democratic, which it is, definitionally. It's not even like the former president's supporters see it as anti-democratic. It literally is anti-democratic. Now, maybe that's okay. Much of the Constitution is anti-democratic by design. All right. The First Amendment, for example, is anti-democratic by design. The people don't get the right to vote to censor. Right. So much of the Constitution is anti-democratic because our founding fathers, somewhat wisely, didn't necessarily trust the people. So it's a good thing, but to say that it's not anti-democratic, there is no dispute that it's anti-democratic. It necessarily is anti-democratic. It would literally prevent Trump from being elected. That's pretty anti-democratic. There's not a lot of ways to view that. Trump faces 4 criminal indictments as well, including 2 related to his efforts to cling power to the 2020 electoral defeat. Trump campaign spokesperson said the people who are pushing this political attack on President Trump are stretching the law beyond recognition, much like the political prosecutions in New York, Georgia, and D.C., which, I tend to agree with at least some of that, to be sure. The New York prosecution with Bragg trying to turn the state-level misdemeanor, to which the statute of limitations has long since expired, into a felony that he can prosecute by bootstrapping a federal cause of action the feds themselves don't even believe in. So that's pretty weird. The whole Georgia thing, I couldn't help noticing that a lot of the indictment seemed to involve around actions that are purely lawful, which maybe they're in furtherance of a criminal conspiracy, but it wasn't exactly overwhelmingly concerning. And the DC indictment also has legal problems as well. So yeah, they are stretching the law a little bit in a lot of these places. The Trump campaign spokesman saying there's no legal basis for the effort to accept in the minds of those who are pushing it. In the New Hampshire lawsuit, Castro, for his part, has asked the judge to issue an injunction to block Scanlon from accepting or processing Trump's declaration of candidacy and any other documentation the former president submits to appear on the state ballot. Scanlon, who's a Republican, told the Globe last week that he was aware of the legal theory and the prospect of litigation. He said he was seeking legal advice both from in-house counsel and Formula's office to ensure any decision he's make is done with a clear understanding of the arguments in play. I feel totally reassured that this guy understands everything that's going on. Scanlon, for his part, said that the violence that unfolded January 6th should never have happened, which, as to that much, I would agree. Violence is bad. It should not have occurred. But suggested he's not well situated to determine whether those events trigger the 14th Amendment, which, yeah, one would imagine for sure. For sure, yeah. I don't know that I'm really qualified to say whether this was an insurrection or not. I think that's for the courts to decide. But you're the one suing. So, okay. Castro isn't the only person pushing for Scanlon to deem Trump ineligible in 2024. From August the 1st to August 24th, more than 24 people contacted Scanlon's office to urge him to take action against Trump unilaterally, apparently. Which, isn't that exactly what they're accusing Trump of doing with respect to Georgia when it comes to election interference? So a whole bunch of people have contacted Scanlon, who works for New Hampshire, to say, hey, Scanlon, have you thought about not having Trump on the ballot? Isn't that kind of exactly what they're accusing Trump of doing with respect to Georgia's Secretary of State? So a whole bunch of people apparently are engaged in campaign interference in New Hampshire, I guess, by their own legal theories. It's always wonderfully satisfying when a person manages to hoist themselves on their own petard. Trump was wrong for making the phone call because that was election interference. And hey, Scanlon, have you considered kicking Trump off the ballot? The cognitive dissonance is real, people. The cognitive dissonance is real. Brian Corker Messner, who's the GOP nominee for the Senate, has also said he's thinking about filing a lawsuit to block Trump from the ballot. Messner, who met with Scanlon on Friday to convey his concerns, said he would consider filing suit on the basis that he's a New Hampshire voter that's harmed by the candidacy, so he's trying to use taxpayer standing, which basically doesn't work. So he's going to try to use the fact that he's just a voter and he's been harmed, which is not sufficient for standing, but I suppose that won't stop him in any way. Messner told the Globe on Tuesday that as far as his own political litigation is concerned, the dispute over Trump's ballot eligibility in New Hampshire is not yet ripe. He declined to comment. New Hampshire GOP Chairman Chris Egger said on Monday he's confident Scanlon and Formula won't block any otherwise qualified candidate from the state ballot. Let voters decide the nominee, not a weaponized federal system using tortured logic. Both the declared candidates in GOP 2024 governor contest has called for the state to allow a presidential primary to play out. We must leave it up to the voters to decide our election at the ballot place, he said. Chuck Morris, a former New Hampshire Senate president who's competing with Outlight, launched a petition demanding Trump and all candidates have ballot access in New Hampshire. Trump actually belongs on the New Hampshire ballots, the lawsuit says. So many competing lawsuits over this whole indictment, to be sure. Thus, that brings us to the end of the story for the moment about the lawsuit to disqualify Trump filed in New Hampshire. So it's going just about as well as you would expect and all that stuff. And yeah, they want to use the 14th Amendment to try to disqualify Trump, even though he hasn't been convicted of anything, even though the Senate didn't convict him for his impeachment, even though the trials are still underway. We'd like to disqualify him for engaging in an insurrection, which, no, Trump didn't do that within any meaning of the law that I understand. So no, but we're going to try anyway. And at least for the moment, that brings us to the end of the discussion of this story.